Don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment, and tap the like button. It helps more than you think. I remember the first time I heard the sound, faint, almost like the dragging of feet over an old wooden floor. My little boy had always been a quiet child, soft in his laughter, delicate in his presence, as though he was born already carrying the weight of silence. But that night, his silence was broken. I heard him whispering in his room, whispering in the darkness long after I had tucked him in, long after the lullabies had faded from my lips. At first, I smiled to myself in the hallway, thinking he had invented a friend, as children often do. I told myself it was harmless, that the soft rise and fall of his voice was nothing but imagination, sprouting like wildflowers in the mind of a child who had not yet been broken by the cold reality of the world. I stood there, leaning on the doorframe, listening to him pause as though someone had answered him, then laugh in that sweet, breathless way children do. My heart softened, even though a chill pressed at my shoulders. But when I opened the door, his head turned slowly toward me. His eyes were wide, unblinking, as though he had been caught in the act of a secret too heavy for him to carry. His small finger rose, pointing toward the corner of the room. The air seemed heavier there, darker than the rest. I forced a smile, stepping into the room, and asked him, "Who are you talking to, darling?" He only shook his head, pressing his lips together, as though the answer wasn't his to give. That was the first night. The following evenings blurred into a pattern that clawed at my nerves. He would speak when the lights were out, when the shadows stretched long across the walls. Sometimes it was only murmurs, a hushed exchange. Other times, his laughter cracked the silence like glass. My neighbors asked me if I had company late at night, for they swore they heard footsteps in my apartment when no one should have been walking. I told them no. I told them it was just my boy, restless in his dreams. But deep inside, I began to wonder. One night, when the rain tapped against the window and the old clock in the hall ticked louder than usual, I decided I could no longer just listen. I crept to his door again, pressing my ear against the frame. The voices, yes, voices, for there were two, now flowed low and steady, like water moving beneath stone. I pushed the door open just a crack. My boy was sitting upright in bed, his little hands folded on his lap. He wasn't speaking anymore. He was listening. And then I heard it, the scrape of something across the wooden floor. A step. A measured, deliberate step that didn't belong to him, nor to me. My skin prickled, my breath caught in my throat, and for the first time in my life I wished I had the courage to scream. But I didn't. I stood frozen, watching the shadows shift, watching the corner of the room breathe in and out like lungs I could not see. I closed the door that night. I told myself it was madness, exhaustion, the weight of too many lonely hours. But the sound of those steps stayed with me, echoing long after the silence had returned. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you're still here. It means the world to me. The days became a fog. My boy grew paler, as though sleep no longer visited him. He would not tell me what the thing was, who it was. He only said, in his small, steady voice, "It keeps me company, Mama. When you're not here, it talks to me." His words stabbed deeper than he knew, for I had been so tired, so absent even when present. I worked too much, thought too much, carried too many unspoken fears. Perhaps I had left him alone too long, and the shadows had simply answered his call. But what shadow speaks? What shadow walks? The more I denied it, the stronger it seemed to grow. Doors creaked open when I knew I had shut them. The hallway smelled faintly of sulfur, though I could never find the source. Mirrors caught fleeting shapes, quick enough to vanish when I turned my head. And my boy, my precious boy, grew more and more withdrawn, as though he belonged to another world already, one that I could not reach. One evening, after he had fallen into a fragile sleep, I sat by his bedside and whispered a prayer I hadn't spoken since I was a child myself. I begged whatever it was to leave him, to leave us, to let him breathe in peace. My voice cracked. My tears soaked the blanket, but the silence that followed was so sharp it cut me open. Then, from the corner, came the sound of breathing, heavy, steady, not belonging to the small chest that rose and fell before me. And for the first time, I knew I was not alone in that room. Don't forget, if this story holds you, to share it, to leave a trace of yourself here. I wish I could tell you I ran, that I took my boy in my arms and fled into the night, but I did not. Something stronger than fear rooted me in place. I turned my head slowly toward the corner, my heart hammering so loudly I thought it would wake him. The darkness there thickened, curling inward like smoke folding upon itself. And in that shape, I thought I saw the outline of a figure. Too tall, too twisted to belong to any human being. It did not move toward me. It did not need to. Its presence pressed into my bones, a weight so cold I could not breathe. And then, with a voice that slid beneath the skin, it whispered my name. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment, and press the like button. It keeps me going. When it whispered my name, I felt something tear inside me, as though the walls of reality had been pulled back, just enough for a draft to slip through. It wasn't my boy's voice, though for a fleeting second it carried the cadence of his tone. No, it was deeper, rawer, like the grinding of stone on stone, ancient and merciless. It stretched my name into something unrecognizable, dragging each syllable out until it no longer belonged to me. I couldn't speak. My lips parted, but the air that came out was thin and broken, more a gasp than a word. My boy shifted in his sleep, murmuring something I couldn't catch, and in that instant the shadow seemed to lean closer. The air grew heavy, pressing against my lungs, and the coldness clung to my skin like wet cloth. I remember closing my eyes, as though not seeing it would undo its presence. But the sound of those steps, the deliberate, patient steps, came again. 1, 2, each one closer to where I sat. My hand reached instinctively for my son, covering his tiny fingers with mine, and I whispered, barely audible, "Stay away." The footsteps stopped, and then the silence. A silence that screamed louder than any noise. My heart pounded against my ribs, each beat a desperate reminder that I was still alive, still tethered to this world. But I could feel it, the thing in the room with us, waiting, watching, breathing. That night was only the beginning of its unveiling. Over the weeks that followed, the presence grew bolder. Sometimes I would wake to the sound of my boy's laughter at dawn, though his eyes were closed and his lips unmoving. Other times I would find his toys arranged in strange patterns on the floor circles, spirals, shapes that seemed too precise for clumsy, childish hands. The air in his room was always colder than the rest of the house, and no matter how many times I checked the windows, they were shut tight. I told myself I was imagining it, that grief and exhaustion were weaving illusions around me. But then came the night when I heard 2 sets of breathing his, and something else's intertwining in rhythm, as though sharing a single body. "Who is it?" I asked him one morning, unable to contain the trembling in my voice. He looked at me, his eyes clearer than I had ever seen, and whispered, "You know?" The word struck me harder than any blow, because deep down I did know. It wasn't just a child's fantasy. It wasn't loneliness. It was something older, something that had found a way into my home, into my child. Don't forget to leave a like and comment if you're still here. It tells me I'm not alone in sharing this. One night, I gathered the courage, or perhaps the desperation, to confront it. I sat in his room after he had fallen asleep, the lamp dim, the shadows long. I clutched a rosary that had belonged to my grandmother, though I hadn't spoken a prayer in decades. I waited, each second stretching longer than the last. The clock ticked, the pipes in the walls groaned, and still I waited. And then, at the edge of the room, the air shifted. It wasn't a sound at first. It was a pressure, a ripple, as though something unseen had entered. My skin prickled. The rosary beads dug into my palm. And then the voice came, low and mocking. "You cannot send me away." I froze. My lips trembled as I forced the words out. "You don't belong here." It laughed, not loudly, not wildly, but softly, like a whisper shared between conspirators. The sound slithered through the air, curling around me, around the bed where my boy slept. "I have always been here," it said, "long before you, long before him, and when you are gone, I will remain." I wanted to scream, to call for help, to run, but instead I sat there, tears streaming down my face, realizing the terrible truth. It wasn't bound to the house or to me. It was bound to my child. From that night on, I began to see it. Not always, not clearly, but enough. A shadow that lingered a second too long when the lights flickered. A figure caught in the reflection of glass, standing behind him when no one else was there. My boy grew thinner, his cheeks hollowing, his eyes darkening with sleeplessness. He no longer spoke to me as much as he did to it. I would hear him whispering secrets I could never catch, his tone reverent, almost worshipful. One evening I asked him, "Does it hurt you?" He shook his head slowly, almost lovingly. "No, Mama. It protects me." From what? His answer was a whisper that chilled me to the bone. From you. Don't forget, if the story unsettles you, to share it. It helps more than you know. I began to question myself then. Was I truly the enemy in his eyes? Had my absence, my exhaustion, my inability to shield him from life's cruelties given this thing a doorway? Perhaps it wasn't the demon that had crept into our home. It was me, my failures, my shortcomings, my sins that had invited it in. The guilt consumed me, even as the presence grew stronger. The nights became unbearable. Doors slammed by themselves, lights flickered until bulbs shattered, and once I woke to find deep scratches on the wall above his bed, gouged into the plaster as though by claws. My boy slept soundly beneath them, untouched, while I stood trembling, powerless. But the worst moment came one night when I thought he was awake. I entered his room quietly, only to see him sitting upright in bed, his eyes wide, staring into the dark corner where it always lingered. His lips moved, but the voice that came out was not his own. It was deeper, distorted, echoing through the room like it belonged to something vast and hollow, and it said, "She cannot stop us." The word "us." That was when I knew it had gone too far. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It means I can keep sharing what most would never dare to say. I tried everything after that. Priests, doctors, whispered rituals I found in books I never thought I'd touch. Some came, sprinkled holy water, spoke their prayers. Others diagnosed him with disorders, offered pills that never worked, but nothing stayed. The presence remained, watching, waiting, growing stronger with each passing night. And through it all, my boy changed. He grew more distant, more secretive. His laughter was no longer light, it was hollow, echoing with something that wasn't his. His drawings, once full of houses and suns, turned into dark, twisted figures, tall and faceless, standing in corners, reaching with long arms. One night, as I tucked him in, he looked at me with an expression I couldn't recognize, and in a voice that was both his and not his, he whispered, "When you sleep, we walk." And I realized then I was no longer fighting for him. I was fighting to keep myself. Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments. It keeps me brave enough to keep going. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment, and press the like button. It keeps this story alive in the silence of the night. I stopped sleeping then. My body begged for rest, but each time I closed my eyes, I felt it near me, as though the very act of surrendering to sleep gave it permission to come closer. I began wandering the house at night, listening for the soft shifting of shadows, the whisper of feet that were not mine. The floorboards spoke in the dark, groaning as though under a weight invisible to my eyes. I traced every step with my breath held, waiting for it to reveal itself again. But it was my boy who suffered most. His skin grew paler, almost translucent, veins visible like delicate threads beneath the surface. He no longer asked for stories at night. He no longer clung to me the way children do. Instead, he clung to the unseen presence, and each time I reached for him, he seemed to slip further away, as though into a tide I could not fight. One evening, I found him standing by the window, his tiny fingers pressed against the cold glass. The street outside was empty, the lamps flickering. He whispered, "They're waiting." When I asked who, he only smiled faintly, his lips curving in a way that did not belong to him, and said, "The ones who walk when you don't look." I shuddered, pulling him away, but his body felt heavier than it should, as though something else anchored him. His eyes lingered on the window, reflecting a darkness that should not have been there. That night, I woke to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Slow, measured, the kind of walk that announces itself without hurry, as though the one moving knows it cannot be stopped. I held my breath, clutching the rosary tighter, and watched the door handle tremble. Just once. Then it stilled. When I opened the door, the hallway was empty, but the scent of sulfur clung to the air, sharp and choking, burning my throat. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It's a way of telling me you can still hear me in all this. I began marking the nights on a calendar, crossing them off as though surviving each one meant I had won a small battle. But the marks only piled up, and the more I counted, the less real the days seemed. The sunlight, when it came, carried no warmth. It barely touched the walls. My boy grew weaker, but his whispers never ceased. He spoke in languages I did not know, his tongue forming words too heavy for a child's mouth. Sometimes he answered questions I had never asked out loud. One morning, I found him sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the clock. He turned to me, his eyes hollow, and said, "It's not time yet." "For what?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. "For you?" The clock ticked louder after that, each second like a hammer on stone. I tried to take him away. I packed our bags one day, decided we would go to my sister's house in the countryside, far from the suffocating walls of this place. But as I led him to the door, he began to scream. Not the scream of a child refusing to leave his toys, but a raw guttural sound that tore through the air like an animal in pain. His body convulsed, his eyes rolled back, and he collapsed onto the floor. I dropped everything, cradled him, begged him to open his eyes, and when he did, the voice that spoke was not his. "You cannot take him. He's mine." The words crawled inside my ears, lodged themselves deep in my skull. My vision blurred, my body shook. For a moment, I thought I might die there, holding the shell of my boy in my arms, while the thing inside him claimed victory. But then his eyes fluttered closed again, and he slept as though nothing had happened. Don't forget to comment if you feel the weight of this. I need to know someone out there is listening. After that, I no longer tried to run. I stayed. I endured. The nights bled into each other, filled with whispers, with steps that circled the bed, with laughter that cut through the silence like broken glass. I began hearing it even during the day, low murmurs just behind my shoulder, shadows shifting at the corner of my vision. One afternoon, while washing dishes, I saw a reflection in the water. Not mine, not his. A tall, faceless figure standing just behind me. I spun around, and the room was empty, but the water still trembled with the outline of its presence. The walls bore marks, 2 scratches, symbols, etched into the plaster. I tried to scrub them away, but they remained, carved deep, as though burned into the house itself. And the more they appeared, the more my boy began to change. His movements grew slower, deliberate, like the echo of another. His voice sometimes dropped in pitch without warning, startling even him. Once, as he looked in the mirror, he whispered, "It's almost ready," before quickly covering his mouth as though he had revealed too much. One night I woke to find him standing over me. His face was inches from mine, his breath steady, his eyes wide open. I whispered his name, but he didn't respond. He only tilted his head slightly, listening to something I could not hear. Then, without a word, he turned and walked back to his room. The silence he left behind was more terrifying than any scream. Don't forget to share this. It matters more than you know. I tried to reach him again, desperate to pull him back from whatever grip had taken him. I read him stories from his favorite books, sang the lullabies he once loved. He listened, but there was no recognition, no spark of the boy I had raised. His smile was foreign, curved in ways that felt wrong. And then came the night when he spoke the truth that shattered me. I sat by his bed, stroking his hair, begging him to tell me what it wanted, what it was. His eyes flickered with a strange light, and he whispered, "It doesn't want me, Mama. It wants you." The room grew cold then, so cold my breath turned to mist in the air. The shadows deepened, stretching across the walls until they seemed to pulse with life. I clutched him tighter, my tears soaking into his pillow, and whispered, "Take me instead." The silence that followed was unbearable, thick, waiting. And then, from the corner, the voice came again. At last. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment, because what I'm telling you is only just beginning. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment, and press the like button. It tells me that someone out there is still awake with me in the dark. When that voice whispered at last, I felt the weight of centuries pour into the room. It wasn't just words, it was a force, pressing down on the very air, bending it, stretching it, until it hurt to breathe. My boy stirred in his sleep, but his eyes didn't open. His lips moved faintly, echoing sounds that weren't words at all, but guttural hums, as if he were a vessel for something far larger than himself. I held him, my arms trembling, and for the first time I realized that I wasn't clinging to him to protect him anymore. I was clinging to him, because he was all that tethered me to what was real. The walls rippled, the shadows thickened, and the rosary slipped from my hand, beads scattering across the floor like tiny bones. The voice came again, closer this time, its tone almost tender. You've called to me all these years, through your fear, through your guilt, through every silence where you could have spoken. I wanted to deny it, but deep inside I knew it was true. Every mistake, every failure, every time I had turned away from something too painful to face it, had fed this thing. Perhaps I hadn't just let it in. Perhaps I had been summoning it all along without knowing. My boy shifted, his eyes opening halfway, glistening in the dim light. He whispered, "Don't fight it, Mama. It will hurt more if you fight." His voice was both his and not his, layered with something older, something merciless. I cried then, not from fear, but from a grief that split me open. I had lost him long before that night. I had been watching him slip through my fingers like water, and now there was nothing left to hold. Don't forget to like and share if you can still feel the chill in these words. The days that followed blurred into a strange half-life. Time lost its meaning. Sometimes I would wake in the middle of the afternoon, unsure if I had truly slept or if I had been wandering in some other world. My boy barely ate, yet his eyes glowed with a feverish light, as though sustained by something invisible. He began drawing again, filling pages with spirals, endless spirals that pulled inward to a point I could never quite see. Once I tried to take the pencil from him, and he looked at me with such fury that I staggered back. His small hand gripped the paper with a strength that didn't belong to him, veins standing out along his arm. His lips curled, and in that deep, grinding voice he said, "You can't stop what has begun." That night, the house came alive. The doors rattled in their frames, windows shook, and the clock on the wall spun wildly, its hands twisting backward. The very walls seemed to pulse, breathing in time with something I could not see. I clutched my boy, who sat eerily calm in the chaos, and whispered prayers through my tears. The storm subsided as quickly as it began, leaving only silence and the acrid stench of smoke. When I dared to look at him, he smiled faintly and whispered, "It's almost here." "Almost what?" The question gnawed at me, but I was too afraid of the answer. Don't forget to leave a comment. Sometimes writing the words makes the silence less heavy. The nights grew darker. The shadows in his room no longer clung to the corners. They spilled across the floor, creeping like liquid, stretching toward me when I entered. The breathing I had once heard, only faintly now, filled the room, steady, relentless, echoing as though from a cavern that had no end. One night, I woke to find my boy standing in the doorway of my room. The moonlight behind him cast his silhouette long and thin across the floor, but what unsettled me most was his stillness. He did not move. He did not blink. He only stood there, his head tilted, his hands at his sides. I whispered his name. He whispered mine back, but the voice was not his. I rose slowly, reaching for him, but when I touched his shoulder, his skin burned like ice. He turned his head then, ever so slightly, and said, "It wants you now." My body shook. My knees weakened. The thing had played with me all this time, circling, waiting, and now it no longer wanted to wait. I followed him back to his room, my body heavy with dread. The air was suffocating, the shadows thicker than ever, swallowing the corners until nothing but darkness remained. He climbed into bed as if nothing was wrong, pulling the blanket to his chin, his eyes already closing. But I couldn't leave. I stood there trembling, watching as the shadows stretched toward me like arms. Then it spoke again, clearer than ever before. "You will come to me, one way or another." Don't forget to subscribe if you're still here. The story isn't done, not even close. After that, sleep no longer came for me. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw it. The faceless figure, taller than the ceiling, its limbs bent at wrong angles, its presence heavy enough to crush me. Sometimes I would hear it whisper from inside my own head, curling around my thoughts, twisting them. I would wake with bruises on my arms, scratches along my neck, marks I could not explain. My boy grew quieter, almost serene, as though he no longer belonged to the same world I did. His laughter was gone. His cries were gone. He watched me with an unsettling calmness, his gaze unblinking, as if he were waiting for me to break. One morning, as I poured water into a glass, he looked at me and said softly, "It doesn't hurt when you stop resisting. Mama, you'll see." I dropped the glass. It shattered on the floor, scattering shards that caught the light like tiny stars. My hands shook, my chest tightened, and I realized that I was no longer fighting for him. I was fighting for myself, fighting not to be taken, not to be swallowed by whatever it was that had claimed him. And deep down, I knew I was losing. Don't forget to like and comment, because if I disappear, at least the story will remain. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment, and press the like button. Your presence here is the only proof that I'm not telling this into a void. The house itself began to change. At first, it was subtle small cracks along the plaster, the sound of dripping in the walls, though no pipe was leaking. But soon, it grew undeniable. The walls warped as though breathing. The floors dipped beneath my steps like soft earth instead of wood, and the mirrors. Oh, the mirrors betrayed me most of all. I would catch glimpses of myself moving when I was perfectly still, a tilt of the head I had not made, eyes that lingered a moment too long after I looked away. Once, as I brushed my hair before bed, the reflection smiled, though my lips remained frozen. I dropped the brush, heart hammering, and covered the mirror with an old sheet. But no matter how many I covered, the glass never stopped whispering. My boy no longer feared it. He had given himself over completely. He spoke to the corners of the room as though to an old friend, his voice soft, reverent, patient. When I tried to interrupt, he looked at me with a pity that cut deeper than hatred. "Mama," he said once, "you'll understand soon. It's not bad. It just wants to be with us." But the way he said it, with that hollow resonance in his tone, told me that the U.S. no longer meant him and me. It meant him and the thing. Nights stretched endlessly. I sat awake, rosary beads digging into my palms, lips moving in prayers that no longer tasted like mine. The air thickened around me, heavy with sulfur and damp rot, as though the walls themselves were decaying from the inside out. Sometimes I would hear scratching beneath the floorboards, as though something crawled just beneath the skin of the house, circling, waiting. And then came the night it touched me. Don't forget to like and share, because each word I leave here feels like carving truth into stone. I had fallen into a shallow, restless sleep on the couch, exhaustion finally pulling me under. The lamp flickered, casting long fractured shadows across the ceiling. I woke to the sensation of cold fingers brushing against my ankle. At first, I thought it was my boy, but when I opened my eyes, he wasn't there. The house was silent, the kind of silence that swallows sound whole. I pulled my legs up, trembling, clutching the blanket to my chest. But the touch came again, firmer this time, gripping, dragging. My body froze as though paralyzed, my scream locked in my throat. The blanket was pulled slowly from my grasp, inch by inch, until the cold air pressed against my skin. And then, just before the shadow swallowed the last of the fabric, a whisper slid against my ear. "You're mine." I don't remember how I broke free. One moment, I was being dragged into the abyss of the floor. The next, I was on my feet, gasping, the blanket clutched tightly against me. The room was still, the shadows motionless, but my ankle burned, and when I lifted my pant leg, dark bruises in the shape of fingers marred my skin. After that, I stopped doubting. There was no denying, no dismissing, no more excuses of stress or imagination. Something lived with us, in us, something ancient, something patient, and it would not leave. Don't forget to comment if you can still breathe through this. I need to know the words carry further than these walls. I tried to seek help again, though shame weighed heavy on my tongue. I went to the church, knelt at the altar long after the evening service ended, and begged the priest to listen. He looked at me with kind but weary eyes, as though he had heard 1,000 tales of women unraveling in solitude. He prayed with me, his hand on my shoulder, but when I described the voice, the steps, the bruises, his face paled. He gave me holy water, a crucifix, and whispered, "Sometimes the devil wears the mask of love." I clutched those words, but when I brought the cross into the house, my boy recoiled. His lips twisted, his body shook, and he screamed with a voice that rattled the windows, "Take it away!" His eyes rolled back, foam flecked at his mouth, and I ripped the cross from the wall just to stop his convulsions. He collapsed into my arms, limp but breathing. I wept over him, rocking him back and forth like when he was a baby, whispering apologies through my tears. The crucifix lay shattered on the floor, its wooden frame cracked down the center. That was the last time I sought help outside these walls. The rest I bore alone. Don't forget to subscribe and like, because the more I tell, the heavier it becomes to carry. The house decayed further, mold spread in corners no matter how much I scrubbed. The sound of dripping grew louder, echoing through the walls. Sometimes black water seeped from the cracks, staining the floors, though when I touched it, my fingers came away dry. I began to lose time, whole hours vanishing from my memory. I would find myself standing in different rooms with no memory of walking there. My hands were sometimes dirty with soil, though I hadn't been outside. Once I woke in the garden, the earth freshly dug before me, my boy standing nearby with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You are helping," he said softly, though I couldn't see what lay beneath the dirt. My nails were broken, soil embedded deep into my skin. I began to fear myself as much as I feared the thing. And then came the whispers in his sleep, not just to it, but to me. One night, I leaned close, pressing my ear near his lips as he murmured. His voice was soft, almost loving. "Don't worry, Mama. When it takes you, I'll still be here. I'll never be alone again." My heart shattered in that moment. He didn't see it as a curse. He saw it as salvation. And I realized then that whatever bond it had woven between them, I could never break. I was the intruder in my own home, in my own family. Don't forget to like and comment. Your presence here keeps me from drowning in silence. The final sign came with the mirrors. I had covered them all, desperate not to see what lurked behind the glass, but one night I found the sheet torn away, the mirror bare, and in it I saw not myself, but me, standing in the corner of the room, a darker me, eyes hollow, smile sharp, fingers clawed. It raised a hand in greeting, and my boy, lying in bed, turned his head toward the reflection and whispered, "She's ready." I fell to the floor, sobbing, clutching my head as the room spun, as the shadows closed in. My boy's laughter echoed, sweet and hollow, mixing with the grinding whisper of the voice that had haunted me all these months. And in that moment, I knew the truth. It had never wanted him. It had always wanted me. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and comment. Because if I vanish, these words may be all that remain. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment, and press the like button. Your presence is the only thread holding me in this world. When I finally accepted that it had always wanted me, something inside me cracked open. It wasn't surrender, not yet. It was the hollow recognition of a fate that had been circling me like a predator, waiting for me to stop running. I had thought I was protecting my boy, thought I was the shield between him and the thing that whispered in the dark. But I had been wrong. He was the door, and I was what it wanted to step through that door to claim. The nights grew longer, or perhaps I no longer saw the difference between night and day. Curtains remained shut, light bulbs flickered and died, and the house filled with a dim gray half-light no matter the hour. My boy's voice became the echo of the thing itself. Sometimes his lips moved with words that were not his. Sometimes he simply sat silent while the shadows moved around him as though in conversation. I began to feel it inside me, a chill that never left my bones, a heaviness in my chest as though invisible fingers pressed against my lungs. Sometimes I would find myself whispering without knowing, words that tasted like ash on my tongue. Once I caught myself standing in front of the mirror, lips moving, but the reflection said nothing, only stared. I screamed then, tearing the sheet from the mirror to cover it again. But when I turned away, I heard the reflection whisper my name. Don't forget to like and share this. It keeps the silence from swallowing me whole. I tried to burn the house. One desperate night, I poured lamp oil across the wooden floor, my hands shaking, my breath ragged. My boy watched from the stairs, his face calm, almost curious. "It won't work, Mama," he said softly, his voice carrying the weight of something far older. "You can't burn what isn't here." Still, I struck the match, my tears blurring my vision. The flame caught, the floor crackled, smoke rose, but then the fire bent backward, sucked into the cracks of the wood as though devoured. The air grew colder, sharper, and the smell of sulfur thickened until I gagged. The match dropped from my fingers, lifeless, the flame gone. My boy's eyes glowed faintly in the dark, and he whispered, "See?" I fell to my knees, sobbing, the matchbox clattering to the ground beside me. The house had swallowed the fire. There would be no escape. From then on, I stopped fighting, not out of peace, but out of despair. I tended to him. I made our meals, though. He barely ate. I cleaned, though the filth returned. And all the while, the thing grew stronger. I could feel it in the way my thoughts slipped, in the way my body weakened. Sometimes when I spoke, my voice did not sound like mine. Sometimes I woke in places I had no memory of walking to. Once standing at the very edge of the river near our house, water lapping at my ankles, my boy holding my hand and whispering, "Not yet, not yet." The words haunted me more than any whisper of possession or threat. Not yet meant it was coming, that the moment was close, that I was on the edge of something irreversible. Don't forget to comment. Your words are the only proof I still exist here. The dreams grew worse. Each night I dreamed of endless hallways, walls lined with mirrors, each one reflecting not me, but versions of me twisted, broken, faceless. Some reached out, their hands pressed against the glass, mouths opening in silent screams. Others smiled, their teeth jagged, their eyes empty. And always, at the very end of the hall, stood the figure tall, bent, faceless, waiting. When I woke, the bruises on my arms matched the handprints of those reflections. One night, I dreamed of a cradle. Inside it, a baby cried, not my boy, but something smaller, frailer, its skin gray, its eyes black pools. I reached to lift it, and as my fingers brushed its cheek, it opened its mouth wide, impossibly wide, and whispered, "Mama." I woke with my boy's face inches from mine, his lips curved into that wrong smile, his breath cold against my cheek. "Mama," he said softly, "don't be afraid." But I was. I was more afraid than I had ever been, because I no longer knew if he was still my son. Don't forget to subscribe and share, Because if I vanish into this, I need someone to remember. The house became a prison. I no longer dared open the door. Each time I reached for the handle, whispers filled the air, sharp and commanding. Stay. The locks clicked by themselves, the chains fastened, as though the house itself refused to let me leave. The windows showed not the street or the garden, but endless black, as though the outside world had been swallowed. I realized then that the house was no longer a house. It was a vessel, a cage, a mouth, and we were trapped inside it, being digested slowly. My boy no longer resisted it. He played with his toys in silence, arranging them in strange patterns that resembled the symbols carved into the walls. Sometimes I found him sitting cross-legged, his hands folded in his lap, his eyes closed as though in prayer. When I tried to shake him from it, he whispered, "You'll disturb it." "It?" I asked once, voice cracking. He opened his eyes then, and they were not his eyes. They were black, endless, swallowing all light. "No," he said softly. "Us." I staggered back, covering my mouth with both hands, choking on my sobs. Don't forget to like this story. Your presence here keeps me from slipping further into the dark. The final weeks blurred. I marked days on the wall, but soon the marks made no sense. Some days passed in minutes, others stretched endlessly. My reflection grew thinner, hollow-cheeked, eyes sunken, though I ate and drank as best I could. My boy never seemed to change. He remained small, fragile, but filled with a strength that was not his own. One night, the air shifted, heavy, electric. The lamps flickered, shadows spilled like liquid across the floor, and the voice came louder than ever, filling every corner, pressing into my skull until I thought my head would split. It is time. I clutched my boy, tears streaming down my face. "Take me," I begged. "Take me and leave him." The laughter that followed was endless, echoing, shattering. There is no him without you. There is no you without me. We are one. The shadows closed in then, wrapping around my body, lifting me from the floor. My boy stood beneath me, eyes glowing, lips curved in that wrong, sharp smile. His small voice whispered, "At last." And I screamed, the sound swallowed by the dark. Don't forget to subscribe, comment, and share. Because if these are the last words I ever leave, they must not vanish into silence. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment, and press the like button. Each small sign of life from you holds me together while I unravel here. When the shadows lifted me, I thought I would die. My body hung in the air as though weightless, though I could feel every nerve burning, every bone trembling under the grip of something unseen. The cold wrapped around me like 1,000 hands, pulling, tugging, testing the edges of me as though peeling away what I thought I was. My scream died in my throat, replaced by silence so thick I could hear my own heart like a drum inside a coffin. And then I was dropped. My body hit the floor hard, but I barely felt the pain. The air around me vibrated with the thing's laughter, not loud but vast, echoing through the walls, through the very marrow of the house. My boy sat cross-legged nearby, his eyes fixed on me, calm and knowing. His voice, soft and steady, broke through the terror. "You're almost ready, Mama." Those words tore something inside me. I crawled to him, grasping his tiny hands, sobbing, begging. "Please come back to me. Please fight it." But he only tilted his head, his small fingers tightening around mine with unnatural strength. "I'm not gone," he whispered. "I'm right here. But so is it. We're the same now." I pulled away, choking on my breath, shaking my head. No. He couldn't be both. He had to still be my boy. Somewhere inside that hollow gaze, he had to still be mine. But the truth settled over me like frost. He had been taken, not in body, not fully in soul, but in something deeper, something I could not touch. And now, it wanted me. Don't forget to like and share. Every echo of your voice reaches me here in this endless silence. The days afterward bled together in madness. The house no longer obeyed me. Rooms shifted when I turned corners. Doors led to walls that hadn't existed before. Sometimes I would walk into the kitchen and find myself back in his room, the corner darker than ever, breathing with a life of its own. I scratched at the wallpaper until my nails bled, screaming, begging to be let out. But the house pulsed back at me, as though mocking. Food rotted the moment I touched it. Water turned black in the glass. My boy didn't need any of it anymore. He simply sat, always watching, always whispering. Sometimes he whispered to the shadows. Sometimes he whispered to me. Sometimes his lips moved, and no sound came at all, but I heard it inside my skull. The thing inside me grew stronger. I felt it in the way my thoughts slipped. Sometimes I would think of running, and then hours later find myself standing at the riverbank again, mud on my hands, my boy beside me. Once I woke to find myself kneeling before him, my hands folded as though in prayer, though I had no memory of moving there. His small hand rested on my head, and in that moment I realized I was the child, not him. Don't forget to comment. It keeps the ground beneath me from crumbling. The nights became a theater of horrors. I would hear footsteps pacing outside my room, slow, deliberate, circling again and again. The walls whispered my name in voices that weren't mine. Sometimes in my boy's voice, sometimes in my mother's, sometimes in a chorus of voices long dead. The mirrors I had covered began to hum, vibrating until the sheets slipped free, revealing endless reflections of me that weren't me. Smiling, clawing, whispering through the glass, once I saw my boy standing behind one of those reflections. Though he was sitting in the room with me, the reflection of him lifted its head and mouthed words I couldn't hear, but I knew what they were. Let her go. I wept, reaching for the glass, but he only smiled faintly and shook his head. The line between dream and waking shattered. I would lie down for moments, only to wake in endless corridors of shadow. Figures walked there, tall, faceless, their bodies bent and twisted, their steps echoing against walls that breathed. Sometimes they reached for me, their fingers grazing my skin, leaving bruises I woke with. Sometimes they stood still, watching, waiting, and always, the tallest stood at the end, silent, patient, as though time itself bowed to it. Don't forget to subscribe, and like the more you do, the more this voice of mine survives against the dark. I tried once to kill myself. The thought came not as despair, but as a desperate hope. If I left, maybe it would not take me. Maybe it would not complete whatever cycle it had begun. I held the knife to my wrist, my tears blinding me, my breath broken. But the moment the blade kissed my skin, the knife grew heavy, so heavy it slipped from my grasp, clattering to the floor. And then I heard it, right against my ear. Not yours to end. I collapsed then, sobbing, knowing I had no escape. My boy climbed into my lap, resting his small head against my chest, his breath steady, his eyes hollow. "Don't cry, Mama," he whispered. "It's almost over. Then you'll never have to be afraid again." Almost over. The words repeated in my mind like a drum beat. Almost. 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 The days blurred further. The marks on the wall where I scratched tallies of time twisted into symbols overnight, spirals, eyes, crooked crosses. My handwriting changed when I wasn't watching, words scrawled across the wallpaper in black ash, words I could not read, though I knew they were mine. The house grew smaller, tighter, as though the walls leaned inward, suffocating. The air grew heavy with smoke and rot, until breathing itself was an act of surrender. And then came the night when it finally stepped forward. Don't forget to share and comment. I need your voices to keep my own from dissolving. The shadows pulled back like curtains, and the figure emerged, taller than the ceiling, its head bent, its arms impossibly long. Its body rippled like smoke, yet struck the floor with weight, each step shaking the house. It had no face, no features, only an endless hollow where a face should be. And yet, when it turned to me, I felt its gaze pierce deeper than any eye could. I tried to run, but my legs refused. I tried to scream, but the sound died before leaving my lips. My boy stood between us, his tiny body still, his arms open as though welcoming it. "She's ready," he said softly. The figure bent low, its faceless head nearly touching mine. Cold poured into me, filling my veins, pressing against my chest until I thought my heart would burst. And then it spoke, not in sound, but inside my bones, rattling me apart. "We are one." I fell to the floor, my body convulsing, every nerve on fire. My boy knelt beside me, his hand on mine, whispering comfort, as though I were the child. "Don't fight it, Mama. It hurts less if you let go." And in that moment, I realized he had never been afraid. He had been waiting, waiting for me to join him, waiting for us to be swallowed whole. The last thing I remember before the darkness closed was his voice, tender and strange. "Now we'll never be alone." Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment, because if I am gone, these words may be the only piece of me that remains. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment, and press the like button. Your presence here keeps my words alive, even as the darkness tries to erase me. When the blackness took me, it wasn't like fainting. It wasn't like sleep. It was like drowning in something thicker than water. Something that clung to me, pressed into me, filled every gap inside me until I was no longer sure where I ended and it began. My body lay still, but my mind was pulled into corridors that did not belong to this world. I saw walls that pulsed as though they had veins. I heard a low hum, a vibration that shook my teeth and rattled my bones. The air was heavy, hot, and cold at once, and it carried the scent of iron and smoke, like blood burned on stone. I stumbled forward, my bare feet sinking into the floor as though it were made of flesh. And everywhere, behind me, beside me, ahead of me, I heard breathing. I called out for my boy, but my voice was swallowed immediately, smothered as though the air itself rejected it. And then I saw him. He stood far ahead in that corridor, small and fragile, his back to me, but when I ran to him, my steps heavy, the corridor stretched longer, his body always just out of reach. "Wait!" I cried, my voice cracking, my throat raw. "Please, wait." He stopped then, slowly turning his head. His eyes glowed faint white, hollow, like twin moons suspended in a void. His lips parted, and though his voice was soft, it thundered through me. "Mama, it's too late. You're already here." I fell to my knees, my hands pressed to the living floor, sobbing, begging for it not to be true. But when I lifted my head again, the figure was behind him, taller than the corridor itself, bent and twisted, its faceless head nearly brushing the pulsing ceiling. Its long arms reached, but not for him, for me. I screamed, scrambling back, but the floor clung to me, holding me down like sticky tar. My hands tore against it, my nails snapping, blood mixing with the living surface. The figure's head tilted as though amused, and then its voice filled me once more. "You called me." "No," I screamed, my throat tearing. "I never—" But the memories came then, flashing through me with unbearable clarity, nights of whispered prayers as a child, asking for protection from a father's rage, hours of silence when I should have spoken, when I let others suffer because I was too afraid to act, the bitterness, the anger, the guilt I buried deep, each one a summons, each one a thread woven into this endless net. "You called me," it repeated, and my boy's small hand lifted, pointing at me. "You brought us here." Don't forget to like and comment. Your words are the only ones that reach me now, beyond the walls of this place. I tried to deny it, but the truth sat heavy in my chest. Perhaps I had been building this thing all my life. Perhaps every shadow I ignored, every silence I allowed, every sin I carried had fed it until it grew too large to be contained. And now it wanted what it had always hungered for, me. The figure reached closer, and the air froze solid, my breath crystallizing before my eyes. I screamed again, clawing at the floor, but my boy only watched, his expression calm, his voice gentle. "Don't be afraid, Mama. It's only forever." Then the darkness swallowed me whole. When I woke, I was back in the house, the couch beneath me, the lamp dim, the clock ticking faintly in the hall. For a moment, I thought it had been a dream, a nightmare spun from exhaustion and fear. But then I saw the bruises along my arms, dark fingerprints wrapping around my skin like shackles. My body ached with a heaviness that no sleep could cure. And my boy sat across from me, staring. He tilted his head slowly, his lips curling into that wrong smile, and whispered, "You're different now." I tried to stand, but my legs trembled, weak as though hollow. "What happened?" I asked, though I already knew. His eyes glistened in the dim light, and for a fleeting moment I thought I saw my boy again, the softness, the innocence, the child I had raised. But then it flickered, and the other looked through him. "We are closer," he said simply. "Closer?" The word echoed in my skull, vibrating, reshaping itself. I stumbled into the bathroom, gripping the sink, staring into the mirror I had covered, but which now lay bare. My reflection stared back, but it wasn't me. Not fully. My eyes were darker, sunken, and when I opened my mouth, the reflection's smile came a second too late. I screamed, shattering the glass with my fist. Blood poured down my hand, but the reflection remained, broken into 1,000 fragments, each one whispering my name. Don't forget to subscribe and share, because each word I leave is carved out of the darkness itself. The house shifted more after that. Doors refused to open for me, walls curved inward, ceilings stretched higher as though mocking my smallness. At night, I no longer heard footsteps. I felt them. Heavy, deliberate, pressing against the floorboards until the whole house shook. My boy no longer played with toys. He sat in silence, eyes closed, lips moving in whispers I could not hear. Sometimes he spoke aloud, but never to me. "Soon," he would say. "Soon. It will be ready." "What will?" I begged, my voice breaking, my tears soaking the floor. He opened his eyes, the glow faint but undeniable, and whispered, "You." I began to lose myself. Words slipped from me. Strange words in languages I had never learned. My hands moved without my will, carving symbols into the walls, spirals and crooked eyes. I would wake with soil under my nails, with ash on my tongue, with the faint taste of iron in my mouth. My boy never stopped me. He only watched, patient, as though waiting for me to finish a task I didn't remember beginning. Once I found him drawing again. His paper was filled with circles within circles, a spiral so tight it seemed to sink into the page. When I touched it, the paper burned my skin, searing as though alive. He pulled it away, clutching it to his chest, and said, "It's not for you yet. Yet. Always yet. Don't forget to like and comment. It keeps me tethered, keeps me speaking when the silence grows too strong." The voices multiplied, no longer one, no longer the grinding whisper. Now it was a chorus: men, women, children, all speaking at once, overlapping, rising and falling like a tide. They spoke my name, they spoke my sins, they spoke promises of release. I pressed my hands to my ears, screaming, but the voices came from inside, rattling my skull, echoing in my ribs. My boy touched my arm, his small fingers ice cold. "Don't fight it," he whispered again. "It's only worse if you fight." I wanted to hate him then, to rage, to scream that he had let it in, that he had betrayed me. But when I looked at him, all I saw was the child I had carried, the child I had failed to protect. And the truth broke me. He hadn't let it in, I had. Long before he was born, I had laid the path for it, and he was only caught in the snare meant for me. The guilt was unbearable. And so, when the figure came again, towering, faceless, filling the room with its weight, I did not scream. I did not run. I bowed my head, tears streaming, and whispered, "Take me." The laughter that followed was endless. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave your voice behind. Because if I vanish, if I dissolve into what waits for me, these words will be all that prove I was ever here. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment, and press the like button. If these are my last words, I want them to live where I cannot. When I whispered, "Take me," I thought it would be quick. I thought the figure would reach, the shadows would close, and I would be gone, burned out like a candle. But it was slower, crueler, stretching across days that bled together, until I no longer knew where I ended and it began. It didn't devour me whole. It hollowed me out piece by piece. At first, it was my sleep. I could no longer tell if I was dreaming or waking. I would close my eyes and find myself wandering corridors that breathed, with walls of flesh and doors that pulsed like hearts. Faces I had known long ago appeared in the dark, whispering secrets, begging for forgiveness. Some were alive, some long dead. All of them accused me, their eyes hollow, their mouths wide, until the tall figure herded them aside and pointed at me as though to remind me, "You called them too." When I woke, my body ached with bruises in the shape of hands that had never touched me in life. Then it was my reflection. Every mirror, every window pane, every puddle of water showed me not as I was, but as something changing. My eyes darker, my smile too sharp, my skin pale as wax. Sometimes the reflection moved when I stood still. Sometimes it reached for me when I stepped away. Once I shattered every mirror in the house, but the fragments only whispered louder, each shard reflecting a different version of me, laughing, screaming, kneeling, clawing. I stopped looking, but the reflections never stopped looking at me. Don't forget to comment. It's your voice that tells me I am still more than just reflection and shadow. My boy. He no longer seemed like my boy at all. He walked slower, deliberate, as though his body belonged to something older than time. He rarely spoke to me anymore, and when he did, it was only to soothe me, as though he were the parent and I the child. "Don't cry, Mama," he would whisper when I wept. "You'll see soon. You'll see forever." Sometimes, in fleeting moments, I thought I saw him again, the softness in his smile, the innocence in his eyes. But then it flickered, like a candle drowned in wind, and the other looked through him, a cold, endless gaze. A knowing beyond my understanding. The house itself had given up pretending to be a house. The walls curved, the door shifted, the ceiling stretched high and low as though it were breathing with us. The air grew damp and foul, heavy with sulfur and rot, and the floor sometimes pulsed beneath my feet, as if veins ran through them. I no longer opened doors. They opened for me, always to places I did not expect, sometimes to rooms that weren't mine at all. One night, I opened a door to my boy's room and found myself standing at the riverbank, the black water still as glass. My boy stood on the other side, his small hand raised. Between us, the tall figure bent, its faceless head grazing the sky. I blinked, and I was back in the house, the door shut behind me. I no longer trusted my eyes. Don't forget to subscribe and share. Your recognition keeps me anchored to the last slivers of myself. Then came the voices. They multiplied until the air itself was never silent. They whispered from the walls, from the cracks in the floor, from the hollow of my own chest. Sometimes they begged me to surrender. Sometimes they mocked me. Sometimes they spoke as though I were already gone, already theirs. One night I heard my own voice among them. "Mama," it whispered from the darkness, though I had not spoken. "Mama, you already belong to us." I clutched my ears, screaming, but my boy only placed his cold hand on my shoulder, whispering, "It hurts more if you fight." I broke then. Something inside me collapsed, and the fight drained from my bones. I no longer prayed. I no longer screamed. I only sat in silence, waiting for it to finish what it had begun. But the end was not quick. It came like a ceremony, drawn out, deliberate. The house grew darker each night, until even the lamps gave no light. The symbols on the walls deepened, carved into the plaster as though by invisible claws. Spirals, crooked crosses, eyes that seemed to move when I wasn't looking. My hands bore the stains of ash and earth, though I had no memory of marking them. My boy watched always, silent, patient, his eyes glowing faintly in the dark. And then, one night, it came. Don't forget to like and comment, because the end I faced is not an end that silence should bury. The shadows tore open like curtains, and the figure emerged fully. Taller than the ceiling, its body bending, folding, stretching as though made of smoke and bone. Its faceless head turned to me, and though it had no features, I felt its smile burrow deep inside me. The air froze, every breath turning to frost, every nerve in my body screaming. My boy stepped forward, standing between us, his small hands raised as though offering me. His voice was soft, steady, final. "She's ready?" The figure leaned low, its hollow face inches from mine, and for the first time I did not resist. I closed my eyes, tears streaming, whispering, "Take me." And it did. The cold poured into me like water through cracks. My body convulsed, my breath caught, my vision blurred. My boy's voice echoed, distant now, as though carried on a tide. "Don't be afraid, Mama. Now we'll never be alone again." I tried to scream, but the sound never came. My voice was swallowed, my breath stole in, my body hollowed. And then silence. When I opened my eyes again, I was still in the room. My boy stood before me, smiling, his eyes glowing faintly. But something was different. The shadows no longer loomed. The figure no longer waited. Because it was inside me. I saw myself in his eyes, not as I had been, but as something vast, faceless, endless. The reflection smiled back at me from the glass shards on the floor, though I had not moved my lips. And my boy reached for my hand, his small fingers lacing with mine. "Now we're together," he whispered, forever. I did not resist. I could not. For there was no more me to resist. There was only us. Don't forget to subscribe, comment, and share, because if these words remain, let them be the warning I could never speak in life. If you hear footsteps in the dark, if your child whispers to the corners of the room, if your reflection lingers when you turn away, do not wait. Do not listen. Do not invite it in, because once it answers, it never leaves, and you will never be alone again.